Welcome back to Mind Matters. Mind Matters is a show where we're attempting to make sense of what in the world is going on. Technology is changing, society is changing, culture is changing, we're changing. I'm pleased to have Sean DeBrea with me, and we're going to kick around some ideas about the social and cultural impacts of what we're witnessing across our country and across the world. Sean, welcome.
Thank you, Kim. It's good to be with you today.
I greatly appreciate it. Before we begin, because I have a lot of questions for you, but before we begin, the audience, I'm sure would like to know what you're doing and where you're at and basically how you got there.
Well, I run a firm, DeBrea Davis & Silk. We are a governmental affairs firm that deals with a variety of issues, mostly non-for-profit, but a lot of governmental affairs and lobbying. I also run a non-for-profit called the Midwest Center for Civil and Religious Liberty, and we're really dedicated to protecting and advancing our religious liberties and also our civil liberties. And so, our conversation today is pretty timely. I started in governmental affairs maybe about 10 years ago, working for various non-for-profits, and moved to the capital, Missouri, Jefferson City a few years ago when I was the executive director of a statewide association. And then a couple of years ago, decided to open my own firm and start a non-for-profit dedicated to the issues that we're kind of talking about today. And so that's how I arrived at where we are.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad we got reconnected. So this is your firm then, I take it?
Yes.
All right, so that's a completely different conversation. I normally like to really talk a lot about the independent business movement and the entrepreneurial movement, but we'll get back to that.
Okay, that sounds good.
We had an interesting conversation just prior to the show, and in effect you said the more things change, some things have to remain the same. And I really want to chat about that a little bit, because what we've been witnessing in the last 10 to 15 years with the emergent social networks and the wide variety of impacts that it's had on the journalistic trade, we seem to have really started to re-engineer how people interact. What are you thinking at this point? What's your opinion in the overall scheme of things?
I think that there are, of course, a lot of changes that are happening. I remember when the internet first became publicly available and they had the URLs that seemed like a mile long. And, I think a lot of people were questioning, how we're going to kind of work in this new world. But there are some principles that I believe that don't change. There was a report that's come out recently. Various folks that are concerned about privacy put together a report kind of rebutting some of the federal government's contentions that there needs to be a weakening of encryption standards in order for us to remain safe and to be able to disrupt some of the terrorist networks that are trying to disrupt our society. And they essentially said that there are so many different ways of being able to disrupt these networks without weakening fundamental privacy or hardware and software officers to put in inherent weaknesses in order for there to be some type of safety measures that the government can use to ensure that we all remain safe. So I think that those fundamental principles of privacy, of freedom of religion, freedom of speech, the ability for us to petition the government, those basic principles have to remain the same. The application of those principles, they may change in some ways, but we don't. Those principles don't need to be unduly curtailed in order for us to be safe, or in order for us to be able to fight those forces which are trying to change our society in ways that limit our liberty and freedom.
There was a gentleman by the name of Scott McNeely. Many years ago, he was the CEO of Sun Microsystems. He once said, "Privacy, get over it." And quite honestly, I haven't bought into that scenario very wholeheartedly. Although I am very interested in what seems to be emerging with the different democratic models that are emerging around the world. We seem to be watching democracy's ability to morph. I know you're involved in a lot of public issues. Do you see politics in the next 5 to 10 years becoming more representative of their constituent base, or the same, or less, or what do you think we ought to be doing there?
Unfortunately, I think that there may be less involvement, but it won't be because of technology necessarily. I think there's less involvement because people are discouraged in terms of their ability to make changes or to be heard. And that more or less has to do with kind of the change in terms of the power that money has versus the power that individual citizens have. At this point in time, money really changes the game in the sense that it allows for some players to have much more access than other players based upon their ability to contribute to campaigns, their ability to support various candidates, and that ability to support allows for the building of relationships. Whereas the typical citizen, they don't have the ability to build those relationships on the basis of money, of being able to contribute. And so I think that poses more of a threat to our democratic republic than any type of technological changes do, because technology facilitates the ability to communicate, it facilitates the ability to interact, it facilitates the ability to strengthen ties that you've already established. But if you don't have the ability to establish strong ties, then technology really doesn't help one way or the other in that sense. It may allow for us to gain more information, but the ability to apply that information within a context of a relationship that allows an individual to be able to have influence over a policymaker or a legislator, those basic principles haven't changed. What's changing is the power of really big players to really consolidate their power because they have so much influence, because money has been given such a larger has been given such a larger voice.
And so as we move forward, how do we begin to cure that? Certainly, I concur with you. We need to start as best we can, because unfortunately, I think in many ways the horse is out of the barn. But we need to start reducing the amount of persuasion that we've allowed in the system with people with large sums of money. I'll use the word graft and corruption because I think they're appropriate. But as we move forward, it also seems to me that a highly educated, consistent communication with the voter base is going to be incredibly important, and I'm not quite sure we're there yet. Do you have any gut reaction to some of the things that you see in the educational front, or what may be your concerns in that arena?
I believe that people really need a better understanding of what it means to be civically engaged.
Okay.
Civil engagement is not entertainment. It's not easy, but it's worthwhile. I mean, the preamble of our Constitution, and our Constitution has within it the principles that basically enunciate that we, the people, are the government. And unfortunately, over the last 30 years, 40 years, we've been told consistently that government is the problem, when in actuality, the message should be that we are the government as citizens. And so therefore, as the governors, so to speak, if we are more engaged in what our representatives who are supposed to work for us and the various departments at the local, state, and federal levels are doing, if we were more civilly engaged, then that would, I think, help people to understand their responsibility and their roles. And therefore, the technology that we have in terms of the ability to access information almost immediately, our ability that we are engaged in right now to be able to communicate over or over large distances with video and audio, all these various capabilities can then be harnessed in a way that allows us to be more engaged and to also have make sure that our representatives and our senators and our policymakers are more accountable to us. I think people have to be more educated and more willing to make the sacrifices that are necessary for our democracy to really function. I mean, freedom isn't free. And unfortunately, so much of education, so much of things that are very important are kind of framed in a way that are, that makes it seem as if in order for it to be useful, it has to be entertaining. And civic engagement can be fun, but it's serious work. And we as citizens have to be engaged in that work in order to make changes that are, quite frankly, very difficult to make.
I would also propose that civil engagement is a major responsibility.
Yes.
Not only is it hard work, but it's also the responsibility of each and every individual. And in an entertainment age, which I hope that we're finally coming to the end of, folks are more complacent with just simply being entertained than they are having to be involved in the activities that have something to do with their future. It's rather interesting. One can only question and conjecture what the writers of the Constitution would have written if they would have had this kind of technology at their disposal. There's no doubt about that. As we draw to a conclusion, I'm afraid we're probably going to start running out of time here. What are your goals? What are some of the things that you want to try to achieve in the immediate future to facilitate your mission?
I really want to help organizations, especially those who are not necessarily inside players, to really understand that they're not only do they have a role, but they also have an ability to influence the process. And so my goal is to really help, particularly non-for-profit players who are interested in helping others to have a voice within the public square, to understand the best ways of doing that, how to harness technology and social media, as well as good old-fashioned relationship building, to use those methods and means to have a voice, to have an influence, to build relationships with policymakers, with legislators, with thought leaders, for their voices to be heard, but not only to be able to be heard, but also to have an influence, to use the various levers of our government and whatnot, to be able to get their messages within the public square, to be able to help legislators and policymakers to hear other perspectives beyond those that are representative of some of the bigger players, like corporations, like individuals who may be very successful business people. And so that's really my goal, to really help various organizations and individuals to better understand their role, to influence our process.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you're helping people make a difference. That's admirable. I'd like to come back. Perhaps we can schedule that another time, but I'm convinced that as we move forward, and I'm going to escalate 10, 15, 20 years into the future, that civic involvement and community involvement are going to become more and more important. They've always been important, but when you have a highly high touch point, highly communicative society, that seems to have knee-jerk reactions to things. We need to have a sense of sanity overlaid on top of our entire society and culture, and there's no better way, I don't think, than people that are engaged not only politically, but engaged with things that make a difference in people's lives. So let's come back to that again.
That would be great.
Sean, I greatly appreciate your time, and I really appreciate it on such short notice. And let's do this again.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Kim. I would love to come back.
Take care. What a fascinating topic. The idea that individuals can make a difference in their society and culture, that's fun. We'll be right back.
I guess sometimes things just happen. Devastating things. It's got nothing to do with fairness. Bam, your whole world changes in an instant. And you never see it coming. That's what happened to me the day my mother had a stroke. I'm Paul George, and I want you to learn the signs of a stroke fast. F-A-S-T. F, face drooping. A, arm weakness. S, speech difficulty. T, time to call 911. Because the sooner they get to the hospital, the sooner they'll get treatment. And that can make a remarkable difference in their recovery. Protect the ones you love. Spot a stroke. F-A-S-T. Fast.
Technology is faster, communication technology is more efficient, and the planet shrinks. We'll be talking to Doug Bruhnke with the Global Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Doug.
Hi, Cam.
Give me a quick brief. What is the Global Chamber, and why would a business person care?
Because we care about increasing value of our local community. We bring money in with exports. We bring money in with foreign direct investment. It's critical that we interact with the world so that we can bring money for education and roads and a better lifestyle in our community.
It makes everybody stronger when we're a global community.
Yes, it does.
We'll be talking shortly. Thanks.
Did you find it? Elbows up, you're
You taught him how to hit a baseball,
looking just like that. Say hi!
how to hit a receiver,
Nice.
the strike zone, the net. You taught him how to hit the upper corner. You even taught him how to hit the open man. But how much time have you spent teaching him what not to hit?
Welcome back to Mind Matters. You know, as the world shrinks, technology gets faster, communications capacity increases so that you're actually talking to somebody around the planet as if they're right next to you. The world really begins to need a better way to coordinate business across a global enterprise. I have with me Doug Bruhnke, the CEO and founder of Global Chamber of Commerce. See if we can get him on the horn. He's not right next to me, but he is kind of virtually. There he is.
Hi, Kim.
How are you?
Outstanding. How about you?
Well, welcome to the virtual world here.
Amazing.
Where I thought we'd start is, at this point, the audience knows very little about what is the Global Chamber of Commerce. And so if you can kind of give us a clue on the background and then how you got here and then what it's for. What are we doing here?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's something that I know a little bit about.
I bet.
8 years ago, somebody, a famous politician, stood up in a room and said, "We've got to keep foreigners out of our country because they take our jobs." And I took that very personally as an affront to ignorance, because that's absolutely not what we want to do. So I started something. The next day, sent an email out, and invited a bunch of people to an event about global business over the next month. And at that point, Global Chamber really was started. That was 8 years ago. Fast forward now 7 years, and we actually launched as the Global Chamber with the registered trademark, with the plans to be in 525 cities around the world. So what happened was phenomenal. There was so much interest. There was a lot of viral activity that happened out of that. The 30,000 people signed on to our newsletters. Were very interested in what we were doing. And so we're basically taking that to the world to not just educate, but do a lot of the things that companies struggle with as they either think about or actually try to go from point A to point B. And point B, unfortunately, is maybe someplace they might have visited on vacation, but they haven't done business there yet. And there's a lot of little things that they're going to need to do to be successful there. And that's why we exist.
I imagine you find many of these companies are somewhat intimidated by the whole idea of going global, but I suspect that what we're discovering is that people want to do business with people, and it really doesn't matter where they live on the planet. Some of the services that you offer, how do they assist somebody? So let's say I wake up tomorrow morning and I have a series of products and services that seem to be relatively successful in my market, and I'm ready to test the water, if you will, and open some offices, some service offerings, and some product offerings on a global basis.
You're right. Most of us would want to have our one customer right across the street, or maybe not even across the street, because you could get killed by a car at least
Like you're
next
walking
door.
back and forth, yeah.
Just walk back and forth and make it very simple. That would be the ideal, except for the fact then you'd now be tied to only one company, and there's a big risk to doing that. So yes, more and more people want to go global. There was a survey that I just saw yesterday. 40% of British companies, small and medium-sized companies, want to be global in 5 years. And contrast that with the US, where less than 1% of companies export today. So there's a huge gap between the number of companies that are doing it today and that will be doing it and want to do it going forward, because they want to have a broad portfolio. They want to be more successful. And so they are intimidated. So absolutely, what we do is we provide information, we provide education, we provide training, and the number one gap is the match. How do I find a customer? How do I find a partner? How do I get to someone that I know and trust so that if I give them a service, I get paid? That's the big gap that exists out there, and that's something that we help with.
And where are you physically located? Where are you right now?
The Global Chamber is headquartered in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have a staff of people who run our operations, if you will, from our location here. And then we're in 40 cities around the world, growing out to 525. And when I say cities, I really mean a metro area. So the New York, Los Angeles, Tokyo, London, those metro areas, we've identified 525 that over the next 3 to 4 years will be growing out to. So the vision of 2020 is 525 metros, 100,000 members, a network of connected by technology and by people that allow us to do business internationally in a lot easier way.
So you're in Phoenix, I'm in St. Louis, and it seems to me that a lot of this globalization is being facilitated by a tremendous improvement in our technology. It's as if you're sitting here next to me. We will begin to see that improve vastly over the course of time with virtual systems and the ability to, in effect, be in someone's office even though you're just sitting on a monitor somewhere. It's fascinating to me. As
Correct.
these firms then become getting connected with the Global Chamber of Commerce, it would seem to me that the economies of scale that kick in, that after a while it becomes easier and easier and easier for people to accept the fact that there are no borders. And it strikes me that that might be one of your mission, is to appease individual and businesses' fears that this is not that complex. It's just a matter of having the right partners in place in order to be successful.
I've studied this market for 8 years, and one of the real challenges for people going international is the services and the support is very fragmented. The good news is there's a lot of people who want to help people going internationally. The bad news is they're not connected in any way. And so that's what the Global Chamber is, a one-stop shop that collaborates with everybody, the only business organization, the first chamber that collaborates with all to support companies going international. And the collaboration doesn't end with just people who are providing services, but it goes to what you said, and that is technology is changing. Last Tuesday, I sat in my office here and made 4 business development calls, basically, with companies that have technologies that are coming. One of them is introduced coming in April that real time does translation. So if you're speaking in, like last night I was at an event, there were many people from Mexico and they were speaking Spanish. I know a little bit of Japanese, but my Spanish is horrible. Wouldn't it be great if we were both talking to each other, she in English, she in Spanish, and I was understanding it, and me in English and she was understanding it in Spanish? That technology's coming. It's here. It's already here. What we need to now is plug these things into this network and into the Global Chamber, and that's what our plan is. So as we grow into these cities, we plug in these technologies that are facilitating growth. And so at the end of the day, guess what? People don't have every moment of the day to think about all of these technologies, all the things to make global business successful, but we do. We think global 24/7. And so any new technology, anything that will help productivity across the border, that's what we're going to do. And we're practicing it every day. I had a good fortune of doing being in a part of an all-star game where I got to do some batting practice with batting practice pitcher, like a real major league pitcher. And you watch baseball on television, it looks really easy because they do it every single day and they're really good. I was trying to get up there after not swinging a bat for about 5 years. I was horrendous. That's part of the problem with these companies. They're not thinking global and doing it every moment of the day. We are, and we help them.
So Global Chamber, in effect, becomes that trusted global partner to assist them in becoming successful. Let's take a look at the website real quick before we have to close. And you actually keyed on one of the questions I was going to have for you, Doug, or what some of the typical issues. It strikes me that language and contractual barriers would always come into play. But there are certainly social and cultural issues that you need to be sensitive to. Is there guidance that you can provide a prospective member there as well?
Absolutely. We have many members who are experts in that area. And then actually, it's funny you should ask that because it was a couple days ago, someone was asking me, well, what about just like basic cultural getting, across the border type conversation, like me going over and having a conversation with a variety of people from Mexico last night. And for me and for you, Kim, it's second nature. But honestly, it's not for everybody. And even if it might be somewhat regular for you as a viewer, you may not be totally comfortable with every single country and what are the customs. Do I show the bottom of my feet or not? And should I shake hands? Or how do I interact here in a way that's comfortable for both of us? Because it can be quite uncomfortable. And so absolutely, that's actually something that we can teach. We have just the basic knowledge of how to do that across cultures, and our network, our global tribe, our members, they're experts. And so we provide the basic level, and then we have access to the finest global resources anyone can ever have. You can't be overwhelmed. So the key is, there's a lot of resources out there, but what we really work hard on doing is dosing it out when you need it, when it's critical, and right at the right time when you need it to get to the next country and to the next country.
Yeah, so it's a matter of not only becoming comfortable with the concept, but just becoming comfortable with the fact that the folks that you're talking to also want to do business with you. And that's really at the bottom line of what Global Chamber is all about, is facilitating and putting people together that want to work together. And that's a wonderful combination. For anyone that might be interested in getting involved, what would they do at this point? They come visit your website.
Stop by globalchamber.org. There's plenty of information there. There's free resources. There's opportunities to come to events. You can see videos. There's all sorts of ways of getting involved depending on what your situation is. Visit us, watch the information, watch us on Twitter and Facebook. As you get more interested and it's more important, come on out and come to an event in a city where we're located, and join the Global Tribe. You can join whether we have a city in one of the cities that we're in, or you can join as a virtual member. And there's resources available, whether you're in a metro where we have an executive director and we have a full-fledged chapter, or we're in a city where there's not necessarily an executive director from Global Chamber, but we still give you resource access.
I like that, the Global Tribe, no doubt about it. So before we part, because I'm getting flagged that we're running out of time, but before we part, any words of wisdom to someone that is ready to make that leap into the global marketplace?
Have no fear. The key thing for business, and one of the real challenges, is when it seems complicated, often we don't act. And we should, because global business is important. It needs to be more of a play for companies in the US and around the world. Less than 1% export, that's a shame. And where it's going is many, many more. I've heard reports that unless you're global in 5 years, you're out of business. That might be an exaggeration. However, that's the way the world is going. It feels uncomfortable, but take the leap.
It sounds like a fair warning. And those that know me professionally well will know that I have to make this comment, but at some point it's not only the Global Chamber, but we're going to have to worry about Mars and the Moon and, and the Solar System Chamber before it's all said and done. Doug, greatly appreciate your time. This has been very enlightening, and it's right in line with the shrinking of the globe as we anticipate as we move forward into 21st century. So, fun opportunity. Thanks for your time.
Smaller and smaller every day.
Every moment. Thanks for your time. As we get deeper into the 21st century, the world's going to get dinkier and dinkier, and we will discover that there are a lot of people that are working very hard to turn the global world into a global economy and to a global opportunity.